Hello, everyone. We are so glad to have you with us today. We are having some beautiful weather where we are, and we hope that you are as well. As we get started, if you don't follow us on LinkedIn, feel free to go ahead and you can scan that code, funky looking QR code right there with your phone camera, and it'll take you to our LinkedIn page where you can follow us. That way you can stay up to date as we release blog posts, news articles, resources, and of course, webinar announcements. All right. So I'll give everyone kind of another minute maybe to come in here. We've got a pretty good crowd today. We want to thank you. First off, this is an Ask the Expert session, and that means you have given us a lot of homework to do in the form of the questions that you've submitted, and we have been working hard to get that all prepared and are excited to answer your questions today. If time allows, we will be answering additional questions at the end. You can use the question box to do that. If any time there's an issue, go ahead and raise your hand. Like if you're having a tech issue or something, I'll be monitoring the chat to try to make sure everything flows smoothly. And if we run out of time, but you have a question, you will see Regina's email, and you can always go to complianceteamllc.com and reach out to us. If get through the session and you think, oh geez, I wish I would have asked that, please feel free to reach out post-webinar. We'll be happy to answer those questions. There were a few questions we may not be able to get to. They were kind of specific, so we'll be following up with you via email after the session. All right, with all of that out of the way, I'd like to do an introduction of today's presenters. So first up, we have Regina Fullin. You know her well. She's our key webinar presenter, and Regina assisting with our clients here at Compliance Team with medical device and pharmaceutical information, compliance, regulations in pharma, medical device related industries. She's knows no bounds, as I say. Within her role here, she's writing articles, she's hosting our webinars, helping our clients and everyone stay current with regulatory changes, industry trends, and to help improve product quality. She has many accolades. This list keeps getting longer every time, I think. She is a certified quality engineer, a certified quality auditor, a certified manager of quality organizational excellence with ASQ, and she holds a regulatory affairs certification for medical devices with RAPS. And up next is Linda Westfall. We are so glad to have Linda with us today. Linda is a software quality consultant and is president of the Westfall team. Which provides software engineering, quality, risk management, training, consulting services. Linda has more than 45 years of experience in the software industry. She has literally written the book on software quality, and she is the author of Certified Software Quality Engineer Handbook. She is a past chair of ASQ Software Division, a contributor to the PMI sorry, I know I'm botching that, sorry. An ASQ fellow, an ASQ CSQE, and many, many other certifications there. This is the dream team, as we said, of software quality, and they have the credentials to back that up. Linda's hobbies include building fireworks, and she is a certified pyrotechnic skilled international grandmaster. So we are so glad to have Linda here and to have this dynamic duo to answer your questions today. I'm excited. I hope you are as well. And without any further ado from the marketing person here at Compliance Team, which is me, Valerie Hoffman, I'm going to pass it over to Regina.
Hi. One thing that I'm seeing that we had some updates to these slides, and one of the things was Linda's email address that somehow didn't make it in this version. That would be lwestfall@westfallteam.com if any of you want to follow up with her on some very specific software related kind of questions. So as we were saying, our presentation today is on cybersecurity. And cybersecurity is a very different thing than, for instance, data integrity. So we want to be very clear here that cybersecurity and data integrity are related, but they are not, in fact, the same thing. And the definition that I was able to pull off the internet for cybersecurity is this one, but Linda, in all her expertise, had me modify it a little bit. So it's the practice of protecting critical systems, functionality, oh boy, and sensitive information from digital attacks. So obviously there has to be a protection element. How are you going to do it? There's going to be hardware, software solutions, and even procedural solutions. Functionality, very critical, especially in medical devices, that the functionality is correct. Sensitive information, so, you know, social security numbers, patient identifiers for HIPAA, and digital attacks. That means there is an attacker. We're not talking about protecting your systems from inadvertent data loss, although that's important, and that would be especially important to validate. But it is going one step further in that you are protecting it from somebody literally attacking you. So then why is cybersecurity important? Well, three main reasons. It's costly, it endangers lives, and it puts privacy at risk. So there's some statistics there that I got from IBM from 2020, that the average cost of a data breach was $3.86 million globally. That was the average cost of one single data breach. And in the United States, that cost went up to $8.64 million per data breach. So you can understand why we had an executive order saying we're going to be protecting our data security with this executive order. And part of the FDA guidance in cybersecurity is resulting from that executive order, especially for medical devices, where the function of that medical device is critical, and more devices are being linked to the internet. That can be very crucial. Linda, do you have anything to add here?
Well, yeah, basically what we are doing is with cybersecurity is we are trying to prevent them from breaking in to begin with. If they do break in, keeping them from doing damage, for example, executing functionality that they shouldn't have had access to begin with, or getting to the data, so that's all the data privacy things, or at least being able to recover from it. I.e., they plant a worm or a virus, we can get that back out. Backups of our data so that we can get that back out, etc.
Yes. So, you know, and that has led the FDA to put out two major guidances on cybersecurity in medical devices. So one thing to make clear about these guidances is that they are guidances. Guidance documents will say, guidance document not for implementation. What does that mean? It's the FDA's thinking on the best practice. They're not necessarily going to enforce it, but if they see that companies are not making the appropriate choices, then maybe there will be a new amendment to Part 11 or something like that about cybersecurity. The other thing to know about these guidances is that they are for design of the medical device and for supporting that design of the medical device. So the left one is for design, the right one is for supporting that medical device once it's released to market. So they are not equivalent to like the ISO documents that are on information security. That's about how an organization can protect its own information assets. These guidances are about medical device manufacturers making the product and supporting the product to make it so that the end users are not affected by a cyber attack. So we're going to have to, delve into this a little bit better, because what are those best practices that we're talking about? And
go back to that slide a minute. We had a couple of questions. First of all, from a software quality engineering perspective, what is the most important security feature to be considering? And my answer to that question would be defects, because most security breaches that happen in the field are attackers taking defects and using those as holes into the system. More than 50% of security breaches are taking advantage of bugs. So the first thing you're going to have to do here is good verification and validation, good software engineering and quality management, build it into your systems so that you can eliminate as many bugs as possible. Do you have anything else to say to that question, Regina?
Well, yeah, I was going to actually piggyback on that and say that, one of the major reasons why those defects exist is because you're not really creating development specs that specifically address the cybersecurity. And I think that that's the main thrust of these documents, is that that's part of your design control, that you create specifications and test them so that you can eliminate the bugs that might have been overlooked if you didn't have specific cybersecurity user requirements.
Okay. Another thing I want to point out is the first bullet on the left talks about hazard analysis. And one of the main reasons, especially in medical devices, that we are interested in cybersecurity is because it's the literally Siamese twin of software safety. If you can't tell me your system is secure, you cannot promise me it's safe. If somebody can break into your system and mess with the functionality or mess with the data, they can make your system unsafe. If they remove the record that says this patient is allergic to penicillin, you could end up with somebody who dies from getting a dose of penicillin when they shouldn't, for example. So yes, we have to get rid of the bugs. We also have to worry about keeping people out of our system, doing access control, as well as having, as what Regina just mentioned, having requirements and design that specifically addresses the internal security controls of your system.
Thank you, Linda.
We had another question here. Regina, what's the difference or commonalities between these two standards and ISO 27001?
Yeah, I think I answered that a little bit, in that 27001 is about an organization being able to protect its own information assets. It's the standard for, if I'm a hospital IT department, how do I protect my hospital's information assets? But it's not about, in this case, design of a medical device, keeping in mind the needs for cybersecurity.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, so we understand what the scope of these documents are. They're not about your company's cybersecurity. It's about the cybersecurity that is being built into the design of the medical device. And so these pre-market cybersecurity best practices are about what you need to do to build cybersecurity into the design. And the first step is to determine whether you are even, if it's even applicable to you. And we'll get into that tier 1 and tier 2 system. And then a lot of times, like, especially for medical devices that are designed for like remote support or something like that, you may be using some software tools that are integrated into the device so that you can do that. Well, there's a national vulnerability database that evaluates all the different software tools that you might be integrating into your system, and you can determine whether those things are vulnerable, whether you have a component that's in there. And that's useful both for determining which components you want to use in your cybersecurity bill of materials, which I get to later, but also if you are looking at legacy design and trying to determine whether you have latent software risks that you haven't yet identified. The next thing is to develop software specifications that directly relate to cybersecurity. You want to actually have that as a section of your user requirement document and have that be in some way testable. Now, again, you can't verify a negative. You can't verify that there are no ways that a extremely creative hacker can find a way into your system, but you can design it so that you can minimize those risks. And that's also done by that cybersecurity bill of materials. Once you've referred to that national vulnerability database, you can put together your system with all the different components based on their lowest risk, and especially lowest risk to your critical functionality of your system. There are numerous ISO standards that relate to cybersecurity. I've only mentioned a couple of them here. There are so many. So your company's IT department and your software developers should be able to understand these documents and be able to incorporate them into their development process. So as a QA person, you may be a software QA person, you may not be a coder, but you should be able to advise your development group of these things. And then finally, you want to do a cybersecurity risk assessment. And there is a commercially available tool out there that employs this common vulnerability scoring that would be a starting point for an FMEA for developing your vulnerability. Is there anything else that I need to discuss here, Linda?
Well, one of the questions that we got ahead of time was, what are some of the special cybersecurity considerations to think about when your devices are using artificial intelligence?
Yeah, and that is difficult to because artificial intelligence is involving machine learning, and so what is the machine learning? Garbage in, garbage out. So in these situations, obviously that's a little vague too, because we don't even know what that AI application is doing. But that is a risk, and maybe we just don't have the technology today to be able to mitigate that risk as well as we might be able to in the future. I don't know, is that what you're thinking too?
Well, I'm actually thinking about connecting this again back to safety, because when you're talking about artificial intelligence, you're giving more and more of the decision authority to the software product. And if you look at how software safety ranks risks, the highest level is autonomous, where you have instantaneous control. There's no time to stop and think or intervene. For example, the airbags in your car. If you get in an accident, they're going to make a decision and go off in seconds. No time to intervene. The same thing is true with a medical device. If you have something where through artificial intelligence, it's making decisions for you, and there's no time. It has to be an instantaneous action. That's going to be your highest risk stuff. The next level is,
Oh yeah, you have
again,
levels.
autonomous, but time to intervene. So this would be something like, you know, your car slams on its brakes because you're getting too close to the car in front of you, but you have time to, you know, steer back into the lane or do something about it so you don't lose control of the car. Where if the airbag goes off, you're going to lose control of the car, kind of thing. So there's different levels. The next one is level of safety risk, is where it's providing information, but the human makes the decision, but it has to be almost an instantaneous decision. And then finally, the lowest level is where there's the time for the person to think about it, to check it out, to make sure it's good before they take the action. So when you go to artificial intelligence, if it's just providing you with information that the human being can then analyze and or reject, like some kind of diagnostic aid, then you don't have as much problems with both security and safety. But if it's something that's making an instantaneous decision and taking action on its own, then artificial intelligence is going to be risky on both high risk on both the security and the safety side. So it, like Regina said, it depends on what you're using the artificial intelligence for.
Thank you for elaborating on that. I knew we discussed that earlier, and I'm happy you brought it back in.
When do you expect this to actually be published? I know it's still in draft form.
No, it's not in draft. Well, it is published. I mean, it's on the FDA's website. These guidances are on the website. Again, they are guidance documents. They are not. You'll even see guidance document not for implementation on there, even if it is a final guidance. What's important is that, you know, I think you mentioned this earlier, is that if the FDA senses that companies aren't taking these guidance documents seriously, they may mandate them in some way. And like I was saying, maybe they amend Part 11 with this stuff. I don't know, or create a new CFR for it. But right now we're not doing this. So the first step in doing your cybersecurity risk assessment is to determine if you are a tier 1 or a tier 2 system. And that is, if it's a tier 1 medical device, it is internet capable. And in fact, intended for being connected to the internet. And, you know, I have 2 examples here where, you know, an MRI machine, it goes to the PACS, it flows to a RIS, it flows to the EMR. The EMR puts things out. That means that theoretically, a hacker could hack into the hospital system and create a software subroutine in the MRI machine that overdoses the patient with a big, well, not MRI. If a CT scanner, if it were a CT scanner, could overdose a patient with you know, tons of radiation. And actually, there is a white paper out there about a malfunction that was similar to that. It was not caused by cybersecurity risk, but it does exist. Or a pulse oximeter, it notifies the nurse's station if the oxygen levels drop below a critical level. Well, what if somebody hacked in and broke that connection and made it look like the patient was fine, but they're like a COVID patient and they stopped breathing and there's no notification at the nurse's station and the patient expires? We don't want that. The opposite side of that is this reduced risk where it's self-contained. There might be software that's driving the device, but it doesn't connect to the internet. Or maybe you can upload the data into your PC via USB port, but it's not continually connected to the internet. I think we had a question about certain devices on this one that I wanted Linda to discuss on this one.
Okay, I'm looking.
This is slide 9.
Yeah, slide. Okay, I'm down too far. Okay, cybersecurity differences for embedded devices versus Windows or tablet applications. Again, most embedded devices, not all. I mean, obviously your cell phone can be connected to the internet, but most embedded devices are fairly standalone, where you're using, the firmware type chips do not necessarily or usually talk to or across the internet. So embedded systems tend to be those self-contained reduced risks unless they have been specifically designed to go on the internet. But things like Windows and tablet applications, even if your application is not a web-based application, there may be other applications on that same tablet or on that same Windows environment that do talk through the internet. Is there any possibility that you could breach through those other activities like, Microsoft Outlook? If they can come in and breach that way, or through your web browser, they may be able to take over the whole laptop or the whole computer and do damage to data that is stored there, or somehow break into the functionality of your other systems that even if they're not talking to the web. So you have more considerations because on a laptop or a PC, there's all these other programs residing that are opening themselves up to the outside world, even if your individual one doesn't. Where with embedded systems, unless they've been specifically designed to talk to the internet, there's nothing else that's running on the same chip at the same time that's going to interface and cause issues.
In fact, I have actually spoken to numerous clients that I've worked with who wanted to, for instance, control their medical device versus via app on an iPad. And I have been advising them that you can do that. I mean, it might be better if you created your own, interface, but if you want to do that, I always suggest that they have a dedicated iPad for it, that, when you ship the device, you're shipping the device with an iPad that has all other applications locked out. And the only thing you can do on that iPad is control the device with it, because there's so much of a risk there. And those are still accessible by the internet, but at least it reduces your risk of malware being uploaded onto the system.
Yeah, and another issue is if you're using a regular PC or laptop, you should be turning off all automated updates.
Right.
Because how your operating system works may impact the application that's running on it. And if they can, which means you need to revalidate every time you update the operating system, which means you need to be turning off all automated updates. And only do that when you are planning to do an upgrade to your software and you can validate the operating system and revalidate your software functionality and interoperability with that platform.
Yeah, and you know what? It reminds me that we forgot to mention earlier when we were talking about the cybersecurity best practices, is that during your development of your software, you should also be creating a plan for how you're going to address these updates. So let's say that there's going to be an operating system update, or that there's going to be some kind of a software component in your cybersecurity bill of materials that's no longer going to be supported. How are you going to manage that? And in addition, they should be risk-based. It should be based on risk. the other way that you need to be discussing this is if you find a bug or it's discovered, maybe you get it through a complaint, how are you going to address it? And again, the time frames would be based on risk and based on just knowing, you would set the criteria up front so you know exactly how you're going to address those updates. But you don't have to worry about them as much if you're a tier 2 system. In fact, you may be able to just document that it's a tier 2 system. It doesn't have internet capability, and a lot of the cybersecurity concerns then are reduced to some nominal level.
And that all goes back to access control. If you have a tier 2 system, then it's locked in the building, or it's behind a chain link fence, or it's not susceptible to the influences of the outside world. That's access control. If you can keep people out of your software, then you have little to no security concerns. As soon as you open yourself up to the internet by any means, even if it's another program running on the same computer as a isolated program, then you've got potentially tier 1 concerns that you need to be paying attention to. But basically, the issue is here, folks, is that this needs to be built into your quality management system, just like all your other good practices. You need security processes for doing good risk analysis, for mitigating and ensuring that requirements and design documents include a place to put your mitigation activities. You need your test plans need to incorporate good verification and validation. For example, if it's a risky component of your system, whether it's safety risk, security risk, liability risk, whatever, those deserve more peer reviews, more extensive peer reviewing, more testing, more analysis. All of this just needs to be included in part of your overall quality management system. All of your policies, your plans, your process documentation, your work instructions, etc. From start to finish, the life of the product in the field, the life of the product through development.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on because I'm looking at the time. And one of the things that you can use is this National Vulnerability Database, and it compiles a list of the vulnerabilities and the tools to resolve them. This site should be really useful to medical device software developers, because as you are employing tools to use, you can choose the ones that are least susceptible to cybersecurity risk. And so I just put that actual nvd.nist.gov, obviously they're part of NIST, and just be able to use it. It's there for public use. And so the FDA actually specifically called out this website, probably because there's probably a high level of trust between, similar government agencies that are committed to quality. You can also use this to evaluate your legacy code for latent risks. And then from there, what you can do is rank your updates, or the types of software updates that you want to make based on risk and based on your complaint history, which might show that there's some cybersecurity risk based on complaint handling for your medical device.
Another thing that NIST has is a standard 800-171, which is a subset of the NIST 800-53, which is huge, but that specifically addresses cybersecurity. And it talks about having your security plans in place, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just another reference that from NIST that you might want to use to see what they have to say. Again, they're more concerned with cybersecurity of government systems, but there's things to learn from them.
Absolutely. And, you know, while we're on the topic of standards, now there are numerous standards that are listed in the FDA guidance document. But these two are called out specifically. And so I wanted to mention them. So, you know, ISO IEC 29147 2014 for information technology, security techniques, vulnerability disclosure. So you can, you know, information about the vulnerabilities, how to disseminate that resolution information to customers, which might be very useful in your plan for how you're going to communicate to your customers about a problem, in addition to your recall processes mandated by FDA. And then, you know, what kind of information that you need to generate in the vulnerability disclosure process. And then they have some examples in there. And then we have another similar one for ISO IEC 30111 for, you know, security techniques for vulnerability handling process. So it gets a little more detailed. And again, you know, we were talking with Linda about the NIST documents. There is a wealth of information out there. It's just a matter of accessing it and using it.
Yeah, there's actually a new one that's coming out, again, more of a guidance document, but it's the CMMC, which is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification that's coming out for Department of Defense type activities. And again, that's available for free from the internet. Another good source.
Yeah, so a lot of these things are not free. And one of these is this risk assessment scoring process. And the reason why I chose this Heartbleed bug as an example is that when I was working back at GE Healthcare, that's when this whole Heartbleed vulnerability came out in the media, and it was a big thing. And luckily, what had happened is that our developers did do a review and found that we did not have this open SSL area that would keep Heartbleed at, you know, would make Heartbleed work. And that was important because our medical devices were actually accessible remotely, so we could perform remote support. So they did the review and they found that they didn't have it, but there's that scoring criteria can go into your FMEA, and it uses the following, and this is on, you know, CVSS version 3.1. You put in the information, you know, what these are the different metrics it tracks. It integrates it. We don't know what the algorithm is, okay? So that 7.5 means nothing to you except for one of the possible scores that you put into your FMEA, and then you still have to talk about, you know, whether it's what type of information is it accessing, or, you know, what kind of damage can it do. We don't know because you have to actually delve a little bit deeper in it, but it's a starting point for doing a really good risk assessment that captures multiple different areas as an input to your FMEA for your software vulnerability.
And another example of that is the new ISO 5055 standard, which looks at various quality attributes, including software security, and there's a scoring mechanism there as well. And what it's looking at is different possible vulnerabilities. And that might be something, because one of our questions was, besides penetration and vulnerability testing, how do you validate cybersecurity? Well, you can do it with some of these analysis tools and get a score, or you can do it with peer reviews of the requirements, design, and code against some kind of scoring standard. But one of the things I love about ISO 5055 is it actually gives you a list of typical security vulnerabilities that you could use as a checklist to look for those vulnerabilities during your peer reviews. For example, is there any possibility of overflowing data fields so that it would overwrite the code? That's one of the ways people used to break into your internet, is they'd put in the URL plus a bunch of SQL code, assuming that it would somehow start executing the SQL code by overflowing your buffer.
Yeah, so there are tools out there. I don't think that the FDA, I think the FDA made this a guidance document because they want you to be able to choose the tool that's most suitable for your intended use. FDA is all about intended use. So, they gave this as an example, but if you want to use the ISO 5055, that would be a useful tool as well. The point is that the FDA wants to see that you're doing something. And this
very
is
dependent on risk analysis, and they can't dictate things because it's a spec. You're not either very risky or not risky at all. It's a whole spectrum. So what you choose to do is going to have to be related to the systems you're building and the environment you're using.
So I guess then the bottom line is that you're going to be taking this information, writing it into your 510K, building your risk assessments, providing the risk analysis that you need to into your 510K, explaining those things for your new device. And it will incorporate the risk assessments. It'll incorporate the safety guidelines. You may even do some, I know you were saying before that there's like white hat hacking, where if you have something that's very critical to protect, you may hire professional hackers to see if they can breach it, right?
Or train your testers to be white hat hackers.
Yeah,
but yes, absolutely.
Right. So you show you've done the work. That should be evident in your 510K application, or if you're doing a de novo or something like that, that too. But and at some point then you are going to get your marketing application approved. But now here the real work begins, because at this point you're now going to have to comply with your cybersecurity bill of materials, meaning that if there's an update, you're going to be freezing out, you want to have your customers working with the correct software versions and using the right operating system updates, or not updating them until you say, yes, this is okay. You're going to have to be managing your security updates. You're now going to have a complaint handling process. Your complaint handling process is going to have to look for those specific complaints that relate to cybersecurity and handle them, as importantly as looking for a hazardous complaint for something and doing a medical device report. You're going to have to address the changes. You're going to have to use your plan that you developed for how you're going to prioritize software updates that are necessary for cybersecurity. And you're going to have to deal with your validation plan. You're going to have to do reporting. Just like you have to do medical device reporting, cybersecurity reporting is also something that's called out in the standard. And you want to make sure that you have good quality system SOPs that address cybersecurity risks and the tasks that you need to do. Is there anything else we need to add here, Linda?
A couple of questions. What is the future landscape of the FDA as far as making these things regulatory rather than just guidance?
Yeah, and I think we answered that earlier, that right now they are guidance. We can see in the past, for instance, like we had Part 11, and then people weren't really following Part 11, and now all of a sudden the FDA said we are now enforcing data integrity, because Part 11 is great for signatures, electronic signatures and records, but the problem is that there were back doors that people were exploiting.
Yeah, one of the things I would say is it's going to stay as guidance as long as the industry behaves and does their due diligence. Personal opinion only.
And I agree with that.
We built bridges in this country, and there was little to no regulation until the first bridge collapsed and killed a bunch of people. And now you have to have professional engineering licenses and people signing off and all kinds of regulations. So if we take the guidance seriously as an industry and do our due diligence and don't have any major incidences, hopefully this will stay as guidance and we can make the appropriate decisions as an industry based on what we need to do, again, based on risk. If it starts being problematic and people start dying because of security breaches, guess what's going to happen? This is going to start turning into regulations, and everybody's going to have to do this, whether it's a good idea or not, just because if you start having incidences, everybody's going to end up with regulations in their back pocket.
Yeah,
so that's my opinion. I think this is something where we have an opportunity as an industry to do it right and leave it as guidance if we do it right.
Yes, I would relate this similar to when I was working, I was working as a laboratory, leader, and my analysts would say, "Oh, but I don't feel like doing that test today. Can I do it tomorrow?" And I said, "No." And the reason why is that, you put it off for tomorrow, you're going to have other things you got to do tomorrow, and you're going to end up having that test result out late. And if you have that test result out late, guess what I have to do? I have to do double the work, because not only do I have to make sure that the testing's getting done, but now I have to send updates on the status of all the testing, because they know that things are going to be late. Just don't give me the double work, get it done today. And this is kind of the same thing. We're going to end up having to do double the work if we don't show that we are doing the right thing proactively. We don't necessarily have to follow the guidance and do it exactly with the methodology that the FDA is dictating to us. We have to do it with the methodology that's appropriate for our medical devices. But if it gets to the point where nobody's doing anything, then the FDA is going to say you have to do it this way. And there's a lot less flexibility in that, and it's going to be more difficult on industry. So just do it the right thing the first time.
Absolutely.
So I think we've kind of ended our last our last slide here. There were a few other questions I have here. Is like, would there be a recall associated with a cybersecurity issue? And it certainly could. If it's a vulnerability where hackers are getting in and they're changing software code that can harm patients, yes, that's definitely a recall. And you should have a plan for how you're going to handle that. Where is that decision made? Well, it would probably fall in with your regular recall process. And you need to build those types of things into your design and development plan for how you're going to update and such. So I would say that if you have, legacy software that came out before this guidance, your best thing is to start off with doing a risk assessment and doing maybe a complaint review and looking for cybersecurity problems, both in your complaint review and looking at those software components and looking at them against the vulnerability database and see if you have any weaknesses, and go back and prioritize your software updates as necessary. Any other questions that we needed to answer?
We've hit the ones on the list ahead of time. You had those ones that were added that came in late, and I don't have a copy of that.
Okay, yeah. Oh, I thought I emailed it to you. I
tried to open it and had problems opening it.
Oh, okay. So, so one question I had was a medical device data system. Let me see it. Val, can you read the questions for us? And in the meantime, I'll pull up that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. I will do my best. Again, sometimes you guys have to give me a little leniency here as I work on the pronunciation of some acronyms that aren't familiar to my.
MDDS is a medical device data system. I know what that is, but I couldn't read the rest of the question.
Yeah, that was a really good point that came in. You guys might want to mention. I had someone chime in with some additional information based on what you were talking about earlier. All right, so let's get to these extra questions that kind of came in. We don't want to miss these. What security standard changes impact medical devices? What security standards changes impact medical device?
Well, I think that they all do, in that, these are, I've mentioned numerous standards here, and they all do, especially if you have a legacy medical device. You want to go back and do your due diligence and evaluate for cybersecurity risks. You can't assume that they're okay because you haven't yet seen any complaints for cybersecurity. But of course, if you had complaints for cybersecurity, that might be another concern.
And if you have any updates to the standard quality management system documents as well, for example, 62304, 82304, the 14971, anything that impacts the quality management system, any changes to those documents over time, you need to interpret those changes in the context of security. For example, if you're told that you now need this new requirement in your quality management system, how does that impact all of the security parts of your quality management system, your plans, your templates, your work instructions, your processes, your policies? So any change to those standards as well needs to be taken into consideration, especially your risk one, because yes, it's safety risk, but remember, safety is a Siamese twin of security. The reason we need security in biomed is mostly to protect the patients, to protect the doctors and nurses from security breaches causing safety issues.
Good answers.
So changes to any of those requirements is going to impact.
Here's a question that I saw in our chat. A question about patchability of embedded software and how to address patches if they have to be developed and tested according to ISO 62304. Any input on that, Linda?
My thing would be, if it's a patch that impacts security if it's a patch to code that has been designated as high risk of security problems, you're going to be doing more V&V. You're going to have to be more diligent about designing and implementing that patch and V&Ving that patch than you would if it was a non-security related component that was being patched.
And I would amend that to security and or safety. And so it's part of understanding how your software is designed and where its do loops are, connecting to other systems and the vulnerabilities of that are being introduced by adding that patch.
Good point.
Yeah. So, it does require an understanding of how your software is built.
But the fact that you're patching it to begin with, it usually indicates that there's a high risk there, because if it wasn't a high risk problem, you wouldn't be patching it. You would be deferring it to the next release of the product line.
Absolutely.
So by its very nature, the fact that you're patching things is an indication that there's high risk there.
Yeah, it's almost just like a quilt. If you have to patch it, it might not have been well designed to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I got a response. Yeah, that was your question. Philosophically, a new release, in my own humble opinion. Oh, okay. Let me see. What other questions do we have? We have on that spreadsheet.
Yeah, there's a good one. What's an FDA acceptable way to secure older instruments? Example, by encapsulation.
Can you read that again?
Yeah, so this person who asked this is looking for an FDA acceptable way to secure older medical device instruments or instruments in general. They give an example using encapsulation.
I'm not familiar with the encapsulation thing in the software. In the software realm.
I would assume that they mean keep it off the internet. They encapsulate it, they isolate it from its environment.
Oh, and if that's the case, then there is no risk from a cybersecurity standpoint. And so
if they encapsulated it, would make it a tier 2.
Right, and then you don't have
by my definition of encapsulation.
Yeah.
If they isolate it from anything external, then it becomes a tier 2.
Yeah, I agree.
That's a really important point to absolutely make there.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got a couple more questions. If you do have a question you want to pop in, we'll hang for a few and answer those that come in. A couple of things as we wrap up the last few questions. I want to let everyone know that we're going to send out a copy of this recording on Monday. We'll include Linda's information in that as well. And appreciate everyone joining us. Like I said, if you've got a few more questions, we're going to answer a few more. Pre-asked question, we got a couple more of those left. All right, this one I'm going to do my best to get through. They're looking for just a little bit of information, or hoping and maybe you guys cover this. AAMI, the TAR 57, related to design controls and the National Vulnerability Database. I think you talked about the NVD a little bit already.
Yeah.
So
we talked about the National Vulnerability Database. Yeah, the AAMI standard. So if you look at the AAMI standard, they're talking about design control as it relates to medical device software. It is mirroring the standard that we discussed already here. So those two can be used in concert, you're basically doing the same thing. You want to build software security into your design.
In fact, design is where you implement, you can have security requirements, but design is where the rubber meets the road. If you do not design your system to be secure, then you're going to be continuously patching and handling issues and dealing with defects. Security has to be built in at the design phase.
Excellent. I think this is the last, well, we might have two more actually. What about using outside companies and tools? That's kind of a broad question. Do you guys have anything sort of just overarching that you want to say to that?
Well, you know what? I thought that was an interesting thing because I think we had another question that came up when someone signed up for the webinar asking about, do you see the future of this being outsourced or do you see it, you know, being handled internally? Well, you cannot outsource your own software security. I mean, you can have somebody maybe, you know, check for your vulnerabilities for you. But, you know, if you are an entity, you're going to be responsible for overseeing your own software security. You can use outsiders to help you with those vulnerabilities, like for instance, the white hat hacking or having somebody do a code review for you as a consultant or a third party. But you are ultimately responsible for what you create. You are ultimately responsible for what you control. There's a concern, especially when you're talking about cloud service. You don't know what they're doing. There's no accountability, especially if you're asking, like, you know, Google Cloud to manage your software for you. You have no control over what they're doing. And do you think that they're gonna, like, you know, let you do a supplier audit? No. You know, they're like, we're Google, we're the 800-pound gorilla. We're not gonna, you know, we're not gonna let you go snoop into our stuff. So, you know, if you're employing third parties, you better have good supplier quality agreements and the ability to do auditing, especially if you're talking about having those people meddle with your critical systems.
I don't know of a quality management system standard out there that doesn't say you're responsible. You have to delegate these if you're having somebody third party build your software or you're using COTS software, you're still responsible. It's your name on the package, folks. If you go back several years, Target at Christmas time had a big security breach and let a whole bunch of people's credit card information get stolen. It wasn't their fault. It was their vendor's fault. But whose name and whose reputation got smeared all over the nightly news? Nobody even heard the vendor. They heard Target, Target, Target. And this is true about your medical device product. It's your name on the package. They don't care if it's third party. They don't care if it's custom built by some other vendor or it's COTS software. It's your name on the product, folks. It's your reputation on the line. You got to do your due diligence.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a really good case in point there with Targets. And you know, the tugs at the PR strings of my heart. So, I must say. Okay, so final question, I think. You guys talked about this a little bit, but high level, what's the most popular approach for incorporating cybersecurity requirements for new medical device? High level, anything you want to add to that, to answer that?
Read read these two guidance documents. This is best practice in the industry. That's what they're defining.
And what's popular is not really necessarily what's right. So, you know, it may be popular to not do anything at all, but it's not right either. What I would also do is start off with doing a software risk assessment. Find out Find out what's critical in your system. Go use the vulnerability database, and if you're going to be integrating software tools into your code, choose the ones that are highest quality for your intended use. Build in your good user requirements that address those risks, and make sure that your developers are aware of all of the guidance documents and ISO standards, and I mean, there's a ton of information out there. It's about selecting the information that works best for your intended use.
And I love that she keeps saying intended use here, folks, because it is going to vary. If you're doing an information system, that's going to be different than if you're doing a tool that's helping the surgeon operate. My husband had his heart surgery done with a Da Vinci machine, where the robot inside his heart is taking the stitches and the doctor's off in front of a screen someplace. That's a different intended use than something that's just keeping a record of my appointments for the doctor. So what if he double books by accident? A defect there isn't going to kill somebody. So it's all intended use and risk based on intended use.
Excellent. All right, I think we're going to end it with that. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. You will get a copy of this. Yeah, do you guys want to go over the summary points before I kind of
suppose we go over the summary.
I'd like to give a very, very brief announcement too.
Please do.
The Software Excellence Academy, which I have founded, does webinars on software quality, software engineering, software project and risk management every week on Wednesday. If you're interested, just shoot me an email and I'll put you on my list so you get reminder messages of those. And in fact, in August, we're going to be doing cybersecurity, and Regina convinced me to do this webinar today in exchange for doing one for me in August when we're doing cybersecurity. So if you're interested, let me know. But we do all kinds of topics.
If you want to send her an email, that's lwestfall@westfallgroup.com.
No, westfallteam.com.
Westfallteam.com, sorry. So we just go, yeah, let's just go here into the summary. We know that cybersecurity is important, especially now that our world is electronically connected, and the FDA has defined some best practices that we may use for our depending on our intended use, to adopt different IT standards to assure cybersecurity in commercially available medical devices, to make it easier for hospitals and patients to use those medical devices safely. And the IT industry has also defined some best practices and tools to use. So if there's so many of them available for adoption, we can use them to develop specific strategies for how we're going to define cybersecurity and plan for those things that we know that are going to happen during the course of the life cycle of a product. And these two guidances for cybersecurity deal with both the development and maintenance of the software throughout its life cycle. And you can incorporate those as SOPs in your quality management system, and you can monitor your cybersecurity breaches for your medical device, just like any other complaint that you might encounter. And so we've already done the Q&A, and thank you.
All right. Yeah, absolutely, guys. Thank you so much for attending today. Thank you, Regina, for your expertise as always. Thank you to Linda for your time and expertise and knowledge here today. I'll be sure to put all of Linda's information in the follow-up email you guys are going to get on Monday, which will include a recording of this session. And we want to encourage you to join us next month. Next month's scheduled webinar is designing a quality system that works. So we hope to see you on that. More information coming at you in the next couple weeks on that. Again, I'm Valerie Hoffman, marketing here at Compliance Team, and want to just thank you again for joining us. If you have any other questions, you can always follow up with us at complianceteamllc.com and look for that email on Monday. Everyone have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.